Margaret would be successful. From the time we were kids, she had that spark, that perfect mix of charm and ruthlessness that spelled success in the business world. I was the quiet one, the studious one, the one our parents described as sweet, while they bragged about Margaret's latest achievement. My name is Sarah Chen, and this is the story of how I learned that being underestimated can be your greatest advantage. Growing up, Margaret was always the star of the family. While I spent my weekends buried in business textbooks, she was winning debate competitions and running successful fundraisers. Your sister has a natural talent for business, our father would say, beaming with pride as Margaret counted the profits from her latest school venture. I didn't mind, not really. I had my own dreams, my own plans. While Margaret focused on flash and immediate results, I studied market trends, business psychology, and innovative management techniques. I was playing the long game, even if nobody else saw it. After college, Margaret landed a prestigious position at Anderson & Brooks, one of the top consulting firms in the city. Within 2 years, she was leading her own team. I took a different path, starting at a smaller firm where I could learn every aspect of the business from the ground up. Still working at that little company, Margaret would ask during family dinners, her voice dripping with condescension. "You know I could put in a word for you at Anderson & Brooks. Entry level, of course, but it would be a start." I would just smile and change the subject. What Margaret didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I was building something of my own. Every client interaction, every project, every late night poring over reports was teaching me something valuable. Then came the opportunity that would change everything. It started with a simple email from James Morrison, CEO of Morrison Technologies. His company was growing rapidly, and he needed help managing the expansion. He'd heard about me through a mutual connection and wanted to meet. I spent weeks preparing for that meeting, analyzing his company from every angle, developing strategies that would help him scale effectively while maintaining the innovation that had made his company successful. The meeting went better than I could have hoped. James was impressed by my thorough understanding of his business and my practical approach to solving his challenges. "You get it," he said, leaning back in his chair. "You actually understand what we're trying to build here." That night, I couldn't wait to share my success with my family. We were having our regular Sunday dinner, and for once I had something that could match Margaret's endless stream of achievements. Morrison Technologies. Margaret's fork clattered against her plate. "James Morrison." "The James Morrison?" I nodded, trying to contain my excitement. "He signed an exclusive consulting contract with me. We're starting next month." The table went silent. Even our parents, who usually hung on Margaret's every word, were staring at me in shock. That's impossible," Margaret sputtered. "Morrison Technologies is worth billions. They wouldn't trust their expansion to someone from a tiny firm like yours." "Well, they did," I said quietly, taking a sip of wine to hide my smile. Margaret's face went through a series of expressions before settling into something that looked almost predatory. "You know, Sarah," she said, her voice honey-sweet, "this is actually perfect timing. I've been thinking about making a change, striking out on my own. Maybe we could work together on this. You could really use my experience." Warning bells went off in my head. Margaret had never shown any interest in working with me before. But before I could respond, our parents jumped in. "What a wonderful idea," Mom clasped her hands together. "You two working together, it would be perfect. Margaret could handle the important client meetings and Sarah, you could do all the background work." Dad nodded enthusiastically. "Your sister's right, Sarah. This is too big for you to handle alone. You need Margaret's expertise." I looked around the table, at Mom and Dad's eager faces, at Margaret's calculating smile, and for the first time in my life, I stood my ground. "Thanks, but no thanks," I said firmly. "I've got this handled." Margaret's smile disappeared. "Don't be stupid, Sarah. You've never handled anything this big before. You'll mess it up without my help." "I appreciate your concern," I replied, standing up, "but I've worked hard for this opportunity and I'm going to see it through on my own." I left before they could argue further, but I could feel Margaret's eyes burning into my back as I walked out. The next few weeks were intense but exhilarating. Working with Morrison Technologies was everything I'd hoped for and more. James and his team were receptive to my ideas, and the initial results were promising. Then the whispers started. First, it was just a few odd comments from clients. "I heard you're partnering with your sister on this," one said. "That must be exciting." No, I corrected them. I'm handling this independently. But the whispers grew louder. Somehow, word was spreading that Margaret was involved in the Morrison Technologies project. I started getting emails addressed to both of us, meeting invitations that included her name. Finally, James called me into his office, looking concerned. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said, shuffling through some papers on his desk. "I'm a bit confused. I've been getting calls from your sister, discussing our project plans." My blood ran cold. "What?" He slid a business card across the desk. It was Margaret's new card, freshly printed with her own consulting firm's logo. And there, under her name, were the words, "Lead Consultant, Morrison Technologies Project." "She's been reaching out to our board members," James continued. "She seems to know a lot about our strategic plans. Said you had brought her in as a partner." "I did not," I said, my voice shaking. "I would never." "She's very convincing," James said gently. "She had details about our discussions, about the strategies we've been developing." That's when I realized Margaret had accessed my laptop during that family dinner. I'd left it in the study while we ate, and she must have copied my files. All my careful plans, all my strategic analysis, everything I'd worked so hard to develop. She's stolen it all. The next few days were a blur of damage control. I tried to explain to James what had happened, but Margaret had already sunk her claws in deep. She convinced several board members that she was the real business genius behind the strategies, that I was just the detail person who'd helped with the grunt work. It all came to a head at the next board meeting. I walked in to find Margaret already there, perfectly poised in her designer's suit, presenting my ideas as her own. As I was explaining to the board, she said smoothly as I entered, "My sister's initial work provided a good foundation, but what you really need is someone with high-level experience to execute these strategies properly." I stood there, watching as she displayed slides I had created, discussed concepts I had developed, all while our parents' words echoed in my head. "This is too big for you to handle alone." When Margaret finished her presentation, she turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sarah, dear, why don't you share your thoughts? I'm sure you have some minor details to add." That was the moment everything changed. Looking at my sister's smug face, at the board members nodding along with her, something inside me snapped, but not in the way they expected. I smiled back, gathered my things, and walked out without saying a word. Margaret had won this battle. She could have Morrison Technologies, but she just taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. Trust no one. Document everything, and always, always have a backup plan. That night, I sat in my apartment, surrounded by years of research, client notes, and business plans. Margaret might have stolen my biggest client, but she hadn't stolen my brain, my experience, or my determination. I opened my laptop and created a new folder, Phoenix Consulting. It was time to rise from the ashes. The first thing I did after losing Morrison Technologies was document everything. Every email, every presentation, every strategy document I created. I compiled it all into a detailed portfolio, not for legal action, but for something more valuable, proof of my capabilities. Margaret might have stolen my work, but she couldn't steal my process. I spent the next month rebuilding from scratch. During the day, I continued working at my small firm, but my nights were dedicated to developing Phoenix Consulting. I wasn't just creating a business. I was creating something that would change the entire industry's approach to strategic growth. While Margaret focused on flashy presentations and big promises, I developed a unique methodology combining data analytics with human-centered design thinking. It wasn't sexy, but it was revolutionary. "You're making a mistake," my mother said during one of her guilt-trip phone calls. "Margaret's doing so well with Morrison Technologies. She could still bring you in." I cut her off mid-sentence. "Mom, I have to go. I'm meeting with investors." That wasn't entirely true. I was actually reviewing startup incubator applications. I'd realized something while watching Margaret steal my work. The real opportunities weren't with established corporations like Morrison Technologies. They were with innovative startups that needed help scaling effectively. The first break came from an unexpected source. Lisa Zhang, a former colleague from my small firm days, had joined a promising AI startup called Neuratech. They were brilliant at technology but struggling with business development. "Their tech is amazing," Lisa told me over coffee, "but they need help translating it into actual market success." I remembered how you helped scale that healthcare app last year. I spent that night reviewing Neurotech's business model and developing a preliminary strategy. By morning, I had a detailed proposal that showed exactly how they could optimize their growth while maintaining their innovative edge. The meeting with Neurotech's founders went differently than my Morrison Technologies presentation. Instead of trying to impress them with industry jargon and flashy slides, I focused on demonstrating deep understanding of their specific challenges. You're not just throwing buzzwords at us. Dr. Adams, their lead developer, said afterward. You actually understand the technology and its potential. They signed with Phoenix Consulting that day, my first major client as an independent consultant. Meanwhile, Margaret was living her dream at Morrison Technologies. Her Instagram was full of power poses in front of corporate logos and humble brag posts about leading the biggest tech expansion in the city's history. What she didn't post about were the growing problems with her implementation of my strategies. She'd understood the words in my plans but not the underlying principles. It was like someone following a recipe without understanding cooking. One small change could ruin the entire dish. I heard through industry contacts that projects were running behind schedule, costs were spiraling, and team morale was plummeting. Margaret's solution was to call more meetings and create more PowerPoint presentations. But I was too busy to gloat. Neurotech's success with my methods had caught attention in the startup community. Suddenly, my inbox was full of inquiries from other innovative companies looking for similar results. I hired Lisa away from her job to help manage the growing workload. Then I brought in David Martinez, a brilliant data analyst I'd worked with on previous projects. Within 6 months, Phoenix Consulting had grown to a team of 10, each person carefully chosen for their expertise and commitment to our methodology. 1 year after Margaret's betrayal, I was sitting in my new office reviewing quarterly reports when Lisa burst in. Have you seen this? She asked, holding up her phone. It was a news article about Morrison Technologies. The stock had dropped 30% after a disastrous quarterly report. The ambitious expansion Margaret had been managing had failed spectacularly. Sources inside the company cite mismanagement and poor strategic planning as key factors in the downturn. The article read, several board members have called for a complete review of all recent strategic initiatives. I set the phone down and turned back to my work. I had proposals to review for 3 new clients, all referred by satisfied customers. That weekend, during our mandatory family dinner, Margaret was uncharacteristically quiet. The usual designer outfit was replaced with something off the rack, and dark circles showed through her carefully applied makeup. The market is just volatile right now, she said defensively when Dad asked about the Morrison Technologies news. Everything's under control. I have a plan. I focused on my food, but I could feel her eyes on me throughout the meal. Finally, as I was helping Mom clear the dishes, Margaret followed me into the kitchen. Look, she said, voice low. I know we've had our differences, but I need your help. The board is breathing down my neck, and nothing's working like it did in your original plans. I placed the dishes in the sink carefully before turning to face her. Nothing's working because you don't understand the underlying principles. You stole the what but didn't comprehend the why. I can pay you, she pressed on as if I hadn't spoken. Morrison Technologies has a generous consulting budget. No, I said simply. Don't be petty, she snapped, mask slipping. This is business. I need those strategies updated. Those weren't just strategies, Margaret. They were a complete methodology that required understanding the company's DNA, their team dynamics, their true potential. You can't just copy and paste success. Oh, and I suppose you're some kind of business genius now, she sneered. I saw your little startup clients. Playing with companies nobody's ever heard of. I pulled out my phone and pulled up Phoenix Consulting's latest financial report. Here are the numbers for my little company. We're projecting 300% growth this quarter. Every single one of our clients has exceeded their growth targets, and we have a waiting list of companies wanting to work with us. Margaret's face went pale as she looked at the figures. How? That's impossible. You've only been operating for a year. I've been operating my whole life, Margaret. While you were focused on looking successful, I was learning how to create success. Real, sustainable, repeatable success. The next month, everything fell apart for Margaret. The Morrison Technologies board called for an independent audit of all her work. When they discovered most of her strategies were copied from my original proposals and poorly implemented, they terminated her contract immediately. Margaret always seemed more focused on taking credit than delivering results. I overheard one board member tell another at an industry event. The real question is who actually developed those initial strategies? They were brilliant, just badly executed. I didn't step forward to claim credit. I didn't have to. My success was speaking for itself. Phoenix Consulting continued to grow. We moved into larger offices, expanded our team, and developed new methodologies for different types of businesses. Our client success stories attracted attention from major business publications. The Phoenix Approach: How a Boutique Consulting Firm is Revolutionizing Business Growth, read the headline in Business Weekly. The article detailed our unique methodology and outstanding success rate, featuring interviews with satisfied clients and industry experts. Margaret tried to rebuild her reputation, but her association with the Morrison Technologies failure followed her. She started her own consulting firm, attempting to copy Phoenix's methods, but without understanding the fundamental principles, she couldn't replicate our success. Then came the final blow. James Morrison himself reached out to me. "I made a mistake," he said during our meeting. "I let politics and flashy presentations distract me from what really mattered: actual results. Would you consider taking Morrison Technologies back as a client? Under new management, of course." I considered it for a moment, then shook my head. "I appreciate the offer, but Phoenix Consulting is focused on working with innovative companies that are trying to build something meaningful. I'd be happy to refer you to some other consultants who might be a better fit." The look of shock on his face was priceless. The Sarah Chen of 2 years ago would never have turned down such a prestigious client. But I wasn't that person anymore. Last week, I received an invitation to speak at the annual Business Innovation Summit, the same event where Margaret had once mockingly suggested I could hand out programs. My keynote speech would be about authentic leadership and sustainable business growth. The day before the summit, I received a text from Margaret. "I heard you're speaking tomorrow. Mom and Dad want to know if you can get them VIP passes." I stared at the message for a long moment before replying. "The event is sold out, but I heard they're streaming it online. Registration is $500 per person. Maybe you can expense it to your new company?" Oh wait, perhaps that was petty, but after years of condescension and manipulation, it felt good to finally stand my ground. The morning of the summit, I stood at the podium looking out over a sea of eager faces: entrepreneurs, business leaders, and innovators who were there to learn from my experience. In the middle of my speech about authentic success and sustainable growth, I spotted a familiar face in the back of the room. Margaret had bought a ticket after all. She sat there in her off-the-rack suit, frantically taking notes as I explained the principles she had never understood. Our eyes met briefly, and for the first time in our lives, I saw something new in her expression: respect. After the speech, my phone buzzed with a notification. Margaret had posted on LinkedIn, "Congratulations to my sister Sarah Chen on an inspiring keynote at #BI Summit. Your success is well deserved." I should have listened years ago. I smiled and slipped my phone back into my pocket without responding. Some lessons have to be learned the hard way. Today, Phoenix Consulting has offices in 3 cities and a team of 50 brilliant professionals. Our client waiting list is months long, and we're constantly developing new ways to help innovative companies achieve sustainable growth. Margaret? Last I heard, she was filing for bankruptcy protection for her failed consulting firm. Mom still brings up at every family dinner how I should help her out, give her a job at Phoenix. I just smile and change the subject. Some people never learn, but I did. Success isn't